Ask Live. But appreciate that introduction, Natalie. My name is Kevin Kuhlman. I'm the Senior Director of Federal Government Relations in Washington, D.C. for NFIB. NFIB is taking steps to provide the most updated information regarding COVID-19 to our members, which includes engaging with elected officials like Congressman Pete Stauber. Please note that NFIB will continually update our website to become a central information resource for small businesses during this pandemic. So please check nfib.com regularly in the coming days for more information as the situation continues to unfold and further regulations are issued. For example, just not more than a half hour ago, we got some guidance from the SBA about how self-employed individuals and independent contractors will apply for the Paycheck Protection Program forgivable loans. But moving on to the main feature of the program, right now your Congressman Pete Stauber would like to provide a timely legislative and implementation update about the pandemic response and the obligations on small business owners. After Congressman Stauber's comments, we will turn to questions. As Natalie said, she received questions from members beforehand, so we'll begin with those. But you can ask additional questions live by typing in the chat box. A little bit about Congressman Stauber. As many of you all know, Congressman Pete Stauber is a Duluth native, currently serving in his first term in Congress as the representative of Minnesota's 8th Congressional District. Prior to his time in Congress, Stauber had a long public service record, working as the St. Louis County Commissioner, City Councilor in Hermantown, and Duluth police officer for over 2 decades. But in addition to his public service, Congressman Stauber is a small business owner and an NFIB member, as he and his brothers own Duluth Hockey Company. So with that, I'd love to turn it over to Congressman Stauber. Thank you for taking the time to do this call. We are grateful you want to spend some time with your fellow members.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate the introduction. I'll get to my small business and give you a little spiel about that too after I get your questions. But really, I wanted to thank you all for your time. Thanks for your continuous support. And obviously, we're here today dealing with this through no fault of our own. And just a little timeline on the 4th of March, we packaged up $8.3 billion of emergency supplemental funding for the federal, state, and local responses to COVID-19. That was included to attempt to get a vaccine up and running. And then on March 13th, we all passed the Families First Coronavirus Act, which required free testing for those who were symptomatic, and then and also the 2-week paid leave for folks that were impacted by the coronavirus or had to care for somebody who had the coronavirus. And then, of course, on the 27th was the CARES Act. That was the act to provide direct relief payments to the American families. $367 billion in forgivable loans to our small businesses, and $150 billion for hospital investments, and that is now into law. So once a week, the GOP gets a conference call, and we get to speak with Treasurer Secretary Mnuchin. I wrote some stats down from this morning, and our call was about 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. So as you know, last week, by unanimous consent, Senator Mitch McConnell requested another $250 billion in the PPP to keep small businesses open and their employees paid, and to keep them on their health insurance, etc. That was tied up with some folks, Senator Schumer and others, that wanted additional monies in there, and so we'll see where that goes. There's been 1 million PPP loans already. That's in 8 days. There's been $240 billion have been processed with 4,600 lenders across the nation. With the PPP program, Secretary Mnuchin said there's $2 billion in loans every single hour. And the money, that PPP money, potentially could run out at the end of this week. And so that's what Senator McConnell wanted, that extra $250 billion in immediately. That would have been just a clean inroad into the CARES package for PPP. And so I think that we can say that PPP's been on its 8th day right now, and Friday they were starting to direct deposit those relief checks, and by that's the $1,200 for singles, $24 for couples, and by Wednesday of this week there should be 80 million Americans will start seeing their payments from that CARES package. And so we're looking right now at finding some holes that we obviously missed on the original package, and we're looking at helping those areas that we missed. And as you alluded to earlier, I am a small business owner, and for 30 years my brothers and I have owned Duluth Hockey Company. I'm 20% owner, and because I am a member of Congress, and the other owners of the company are family members, we don't qualify for any loans other than the PPP. Every other loan available, we do not qualify for under this coronavirus package because I am a member of Congress and own a small business, and the other owners are family members. So as frustrating as that may sound, it's very, very difficult right now for my brothers and I in the small business, just like it is for the 30 million other small businesses across this nation. So with that, I think I'll take, that was just a 2-minute wrap up. And I just wanted to give you where we stand right now. Looks like we will not be back into DC at least or until May 4th, if not beyond, because of the virus potentially surging in the Washington, D.C. area per their modeling. So it's kind of wait and see, but we're using technology to get around. And I will say that, again, the CARES Act wasn't perfect, but I will say that certain parts of the federal government are literally working at breakneck speed, compared to how we quote normally or the process normally goes because of this pandemic. And as frustrating as it is, and it is frustrating, I will say that as a nation, we're going to get through this stronger, more resilient, and more self-reliant than we've ever been before. And there's a whole lot of talk about making sure that this never happens and again this way. And we will be more prepared. We will have the pharmaceuticals manufactured in this country. We'll have the strategic metals and minerals that make our hospital equipment and our satellites and our defense, our tanks and our ships and our airplanes made with the minerals mined in this great country. So we're going to have those discussions when we get back, and that's really a bipartisan and really a nonpartisan issue. So with that, I will take some questions if you have them, and if I can answer them, I will make sure that we get back to you. I think on the phone also is my legislative director, from our Washington, D.C. office, Jeff Bishop. So Jeff's on. If I don't know the answer, Jeff may be able to kind of jump in and steer us to that right answer. So with that, Kevin, thanks.
Thank you, Congressman Stauber, and I'm happy to try to help answer questions as well. And appreciate you're one of the few business owners, members of Congress. We got about 29 NFIB members who are currently members of Congress. So you all have a unique experience, and thank you for sharing your frustration. And on that theme, we've got a question from Bill Nieders of Bill Nieders and Electric, and he's kind of the unresponsiveness so far. So he's applied for one of the SBA economic injury disaster loans and have heard nothing from SBA. 0 emails acknowledging my application, 0 cash received. Same goes for the Paycheck Protection Program. And he had to take drastic measures such as laying off himself and his son, but Minnesota unemployment shows that it won't even review things until the end of April, 4/27. Just kind of curious of what any recommendations or additional talk of options at this point.
Well, I think as Bill described, I think he's done everything. He's worked with his banks on the PPP loans. There are also I don't see where he requested any or applied for any idle loans that goes with it. and then of course unemployment insurance. So what's happening is what we're finding not only in Minnesota but other areas. So if you're a sole proprietor or an owner of a business, you could not have prior to this applied for unemployment insurance, and so but because of this virus, you're able to. And we have talked with the governor of Minnesota. He's working with his staff. Minnesota Deed is where you would apply for that unemployment insurance. And I'm hearing people that are business owners that are go to apply, and they get put in a holding pattern before they are finally, if at all, accepted. And I've heard of people not having any responses for 3 or 4 or 5 days. That was brought up to the governor and this morning and last week, and he's saying, well, we're working on it, we're trying to process these. It's because the mechanism in place doesn't allow for business owners to collect unemployment insurance themselves. And so I know the state is working through that. At times it can be very frustrating, especially when you have to have those bills being paid and utilities to be paid, etc. So I think that the options that I would suggest to Bill is, and this isn't probably the one he wants to hear, but still call them, and sometimes the wait times are long. I've heard my brother tell me up to like 4 hours. That's unacceptable, and we pass that on. But the bottom line is, I think that he goes through the PPP, the EIDL, and the unemployment insurance. Those are the quickest and easiest right now to help get him through this situation.
Thank you, Congressman. I think I'd agree with that. We're hearing some media reports actually recently on those EIDL loans, the economic injury disaster loans, the ones that are directly through SBA. We've heard a lot of bad communication from SBA, and in fact that they may have exhausted all of those loans already or are nearly have done so, and they may be even limiting them. So for example, on the $10,000 emergency grants, maybe only limiting them to $1,000 per employee. On the EIDL loans, maybe only $15,000 per business. And they're calling it an initial disbursement, but that may be something as, in addition to revisiting the PPP funds, which I absolutely agree are necessary in the first come, first served basis, maybe taking a look at the EIDL loans and the emergency grants associated with those.
That's a great comment, and I will share with you that one of the concerns as we went into this was making sure that our small business administration had the proper IT support, had the proper staffing, because they're good. We knew that SBA was going to be inundated, and we've talked to staff. I've talked to my ranking member, Shabbat, on that. They're trying to get as many people and as many frequently asked questions out there as they possibly can, because there's so many scenarios. But that is a good suggestion on the EIDL loans. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. You also mentioned in your opening comments local issues, for example, protecting some of the mining. We had a question from Ron Brochu here, saying with so many blast furnaces being shut down by steel mills, iron mines probably will follow, along with maritime shipping industry, just talking about the downstream effect, the multiplier effect. Is there a plan in place to address the economic devastation that this will cause to northeastern Minnesota?
So I think that the answer is North Shore and the Tilden mine in Michigan have shut down and will be for a while. The concern is for us, the concern is obviously the unemployment and what have you. And strategically, our iron ore mining in northeastern Minnesota, we put forth 60% of the iron ore that makes the steel in this country. So the Minnesota's 8th congressional district is really a strategic national security district when you talk about minerals and mining, and in particular iron ore mining. So what we want to be able to do is twofold. Make sure that, because it was said that by Lorenzo Consalve, the CEO of Cliffs, that the COVID-19 has reduced the steel request throughout this country and the world. And so they're shutting down in hopes of having a very short shutdown. I think only 100 folks will be left at North Shore. And that's devastating news for our region. We talk about taconite, timber, and tourism are three of those big pillars that help northeastern Minnesota sustain, and there are economic drivers. What we're looking at right now, and I have specifically talked with the president on this, do not take away those 232 steel tariffs. It will cripple this nation, and it will cripple northeastern Minnesota. We have to understand that the country of China has flat and rolled steel on their shores, just waiting for the 232 steel tariffs to come off, and they will dump their steel in our country, which would be devastating. The steel that they dump is brittle, cheap, dirty, doesn't use the labor or environmental standards that we use in our country, and so we need to protect our mining and our steel making industries in this nation. And so as we go through this downturn, I would just say, Ron, no on the backside. I am pleading with the President Trump not to take out the 232 steel tariffs, because it will be devastating for our industry and our economy in northeastern Minnesota and our strategic national security. So those are some of the things that I'm putting in place and making sure that the unemployment insurance, et cetera, is available and ready for those workers who will soon be on unemployment.
Thank you, Congressman Stauber. Related, we have a question from Jason Janish in the chat as well. And you already answered kind of what's coming. You also mentioned the increased unemployment insurance that's included in the CARES Act. We've talked about the Paycheck Protection Program and the through the private financial institutions, but just kind of wondering if there are any specific protections for the taconite plants and steel makers as part of the CARES Act, the phase 3 law that was passed on March 27th.
Well, they will fall under, the uninsurance employment that we talked about. They're going to, as far as my biggest concern is not taking off those 232 tariffs, as I just said, because if we take those off, those mines may delay start even further. I will share with you that I had a phone call, delegation call with our Governor Walz this morning, and he made the comment that our unemployment insurance, as it stands with the unemployment request, should be able to make it till October. And my initial response was, I don't want this to go till October. I think that with a potential vaccine and social distancing in certain areas of our economy, we need to, get them back up and running like a parallel track. Not only the health and safety of the people, reference COVID-19 is a priority, but that parallel track with the economy and our small businesses. So you can when we open up other manufacturing facilities, when we put together a potential relief package and it involves a major infrastructure package, that's going to help our steel mills open up too, because they're going to be making our bridges and our re-rod and everything else for all these projects. So those are some things that we have in our mind and really want to have that healthy discussion when we get back. But I think the real important thing is to make sure that these bills are clean. For instance, the $250 billion put forth by Senator McConnell, that was specifically to add to the PPP program. And there was no amendments or et cetera on either side, and it was denied. We have to work in a quick fashion to make sure that PPP money is there for those other businesses that are coming online requesting those loans. As we said, $2 billion an hour is going out to the SBA on this.
Thank you, Congressman. Shifting a little bit over to that recovery, and as we kind of get out of this, that there will be associated testing with that. And we have a question here. Pull up the right screen. I'm sorry about that. Question here from Michael Schwartzwald, who's a community pharmacist, it appears, Guide Point Pharmacy. Said Minnesota has not applied for a CMS waiver, this one specifically called an 1135B waiver, as many other states have. Other states have also added a waiver to include reimbursement for pharmacy, home delivery, and or associated COVID-19 support services. I don't know if in your conversation with Governor Walz this morning, he mentioned anything about kind of increased testing and the ability of pharmacies to help with that and get reimbursed for it. But as we do think about returning to work and knowing that we're going to have to monitor and test people in order for everything to be safe, how could pharmacies be in the position to serve as a resource and be reimbursed to help with the testing and return back to work?
Well, specifically to the question, I'll just say that I can't speak necessarily to the reasons why our state hasn't applied for that particular waiver yet, because that would be a question for really our state representatives and our governor. But I can tell you that HHS and CMS, they've been extremely agile in issuing waivers for services once they're submitted. So they're trying to ensure maximum flexibility to the states and localities really to best deal with this crisis and our ever-changing healthcare system as we know it. So that's really a state, state question, and I can't answer that. I think our state representatives or their governor certainly could.
Thank you. Just have you gotten any intel from whether it's the governor or this task force that's announced today at the White House? And this is from our friend Jerry Cordes-Mackey. Just wondering, when are we going to get back to work? Have you heard any sort of plan or insight on that?
So I know that the governors, the small business folks, the Chamber of Commerce, and the likes. I think it's really, like I say, a bipartisan and a nonpartisan issue to get this economy back up and running soon. And I think that the goal is to do the best we can to contain the virus. And I think we're doing a really good job, but also having the flexibility to look at those positions that you can social distance, or look at those jobs that you can social distance just by doing what that job requires. The governor today talked about certain golf courses being open, potentially certain resorts. The folks that do the landscaping, etc., they're social distancing just by the fact they're outside and away from each other doing the work. And so I know that the governor is getting a lot of interest, and people are requesting that he really take a look at opening up these businesses that you can social distance at and make sense. And we have in northern Minnesota, actually in the entire state of Minnesota, we have a fishing opener that's coming up. And one of the things that many people have talked to me about is we can't shut our boat ramps down. I mean, we take our families. We've been social distancing with our families for 3 weeks now. We can take them in the boat and go fishing, or we can still go up to the resort that we've are scheduled to be at, because our cabin is 50, 60 feet away from anybody else. And so the governor is looking at that, and I know that there's many businesses because they've called me, and I've said you have to. The governor has shut down, made the decision with the data that it was given to him, and the information, and the people around him have given him the information which he has made a decision. So the goal is to have that parallel track when the economy starts, and I think it's going to start a little slow, and then the goal is to start ramping it up real quick. We went into this situation with the best economy this nation has ever had, and that's a strong suit to play as we come out. There's goals that we can shoot for, but I think you're looking at some industries that are going to be a little slower to get online, due to the shutdown and the governor and others making decisions who's essential and who's not.
Thank you, Congressman. I agree. And this is kind of a follow-up to that, and it was basically kind of shows all of our research tracks closely with this. 2 months ago, we had near record high small business optimism. Finding qualified employees was the number one concern. Right here, Jerry says, 2 months ago, I could not get any employees because the market was so tight. Now I cannot get workers because the expanded unemployment insurance pays individuals more to not work than to work. Is there anything that can be done to help mitigate the extra $600 per week in pandemic unemployment insurance compensation? It's a major concern.
As I said earlier, we know that the CARES system, is not perfect, but we're continuing to ensure that we're not keeping or disincentivizing people from re-entering their workforce, when this is all over. The same question we've had the restaurant industry and whatever talk about that the $600 additional to the unemployment doesn't even come close to the tips these waiters and waitresses received throughout their throughout their working time. And so this was kind of I guess for lack of a better term, kind of a compromise right now. We want to incentivize work, and we tried to mitigate. We're going to try to mitigate this. We tried to mitigate it when it first passed, but I share their concern. I share the concern that some people don't want to come back. However, I will say that if you are a business and you come back online and you bring that employee, John Doe, back, you request John Doe come back to work because you're ready to go. Your business, we're open for business, so to speak. The governor has says, yeah, if it's just XYZ business can open, and you open and you call that employee back to work, and that employee says, no, I'm not coming back to work, they do not continuously get that insurance if you brought them back and they refuse to come back. That's not what this is for. So they can sit for those 8 weeks and do this. When that business is up and running, when the governor opens it up and you call John Doe back, John Doe has to come back. Otherwise he forfeits his eligibility for that unemployment insurance. And that doesn't count against the business. That's reported to deed that John Doe refuses to show up. We're open, and the process will go from there. And I think that we're working to mitigate this, but I've heard this quite a bit. But I really do feel that the vast majority of people want to go back to work.
Thank you, Congressman. And I think it's all of our hopes that we do return to that, where finding qualified employees is more of a problem. That means that it's a good economy. So received one question in the email from a Shayna Kirchhoff, who's a dairy farmer member. If you could, I'm going with the wrong one. Asked to speak how the CARES Act or any of the other COVID response legislations might provide assistance with regards to farms or agricultural businesses.
Yeah, so on our conference call today, that was brought up. There was $9.5 billion into the CARES package specifically for farmers, and so we're looking at not only the dairy farmers, but I think that what we're saying is because things are shut down, the schools are shut down, the restaurants are shut down. They're not taking Hormel's not taking the hogs in, and the dairy folks don't have an outlet for this, and it is becoming crunch time. And I sent a letter to the USDA urging them to get this money out to our farmers ASAP. And I think that's important that we take this seriously in reference to our farmers, because if they go out of business, for a lack of a better term, they don't have any income, they may not come back, and it's critical. So you look at that supply chain. You look at, for instance, the dairy farmers. they don't have an outlet for their milk, or they're not selling their milk. Well, it's because the schools are shut down, the economy shut down, the bars and restaurants are shut down. They're not ordering that, so there's not the demand for it, and therefore these farmers are sitting with these commodities or products and have nowhere to bring them to market. And that's why I sent the letter to the USDA to get these farmers the assistance immediately, because we know that Minnesota farmers not only feed us, but they feed this nation and they feed the world. And that's how important that critical supply of food is. And it's not only farmers in that great state of Minnesota, but farmers across the nation. And I think Secretary Perdue understands this. In our conference call with him last week, he was very aware, and so was our Minnesota delegation on the conference call this morning.
Thank you, Congressman. Another question submitted beforehand was from Zachary Carnes of Zacoby LLC, and he I'm going to start with his conclusion about how entrepreneurs will really get us through this crisis, as opposed to political differences. He mentions the IRS collected $3.5 trillion in taxes next year. And it just seems a little counterintuitive to have the federal government dole out this money in increasingly frustrating ways. Done the math, crunched the numbers, using the current standard of living for the family, and basically, if you didn't collect taxes, be able to live for 12 to 16 months on the refund alone for just giving back the taxes. Business could operate for full payroll for 6 to 8 months without making a single product. And those numbers go up if you defer this year's taxes and restart from zero in 2021. So just kind of curious, as you think about future phases, any insight into whether other tax relief measures, in other words, just letting individuals and businesses kind of keep the money to use as cash flow, is that something that's under consideration?
Well, first of all, Zachary, I mean, he's in his statement that you read, the entrepreneurs will get us through this and not politics, and I agree with them. The ingenuity and the resilience of the American people are the things that are going to get us through this difficult time. What the government has tried their best to provide financial stability to all our small businesses and families who have lost some sort of income, and they've lost it so quickly due to this. And certainly the legislation that we in Congress have passed thus far, it's not perfect, as I stated earlier, but it's built out of compromise. And I'm going to continue to support those policies that will help the American people and help the small businessmen and women across this country return to normalcy as soon as possible. I understand, we all know we're not here because of but not one of us had the fault in this. But we're here, and together we're going to get out of this, and that's why I will say, and my office stands for questions and open, good ideas that we can bring to the ranking members on the respective committees to help us put really good legislation to get us back to where we were prior to the pandemic.
Thank you, Congressman. Another question here from Brandy Herbst of Bees Home Care. Two pieces to this question. First is with unemployment. And that is, sorry, that's my 5-year-old office assistant. Talking about worried about the increased unemployment insurance or increased unemployment rates and the increased unemployment insurance payments. Is there any protection that can be provided on the back end from having increased unemployment insurance taxes? And just kind of further a discussion about how it might make it difficult to bring employees back with the unemployment insurance thing. But how about we just focus on that first part of just saying, is there anything you could look at the federal level or encourage folks at the state level to try to push back against increased unemployment insurance taxes as a result?
Well, first off, the state level is something that involves our state reps and our state senators and of course the governor. But again, I'll say that the PPP is one way that we're just trying to keep folks off of unemployment. If we can just maintain consistency, it's going to be easier for us to return, to normal. We want those workers to stay really attached to the businesses during this time. And again, we don't sound perfect, but we're going to ensure that we're not keeping or disincentivizing people returning to work when this is over. We want them back to work, not on unemployment. And then furthermore, the PPP and idle money is going out as we speak. And if you're having trouble getting access, anybody's having trouble getting access to these funds, please talk to your lender and the SBA. And if that is still not successful for you, please reach out to our office and we can attempt to make some inquiries on your behalf.
Thank you, Congressman. Another question popped up from Curtis Smith in the chat, and it's in your conversation with your colleagues, a local versus the other states. What's the biggest difference between Minnesota's situation with COVID-19 as opposed to other states, particularly in reference to small businesses? Congressman Stauber, are you there?
Oh yeah, I started. I was on mute. I apologize. So when we look at the ability to potentially bring a package for, we're going to look at finding again those holes that are noted, and trying to fix them in this next package. The biggest challenge for us is going to be actually putting legislation that helps small businesses. And I think if in a nonpartisan way, we can do that. However, I think that when you add carbon emissions from airplanes and you put a performing arts center in Washington, D.C. as part of this package, that's when it starts to turn in a negative way. So I think that really in that bipartisan fashion, in that in the way that I think that we need to go, we're going to find and help with the solutions. And the best solutions or ideas come from those people that are on the ground. I know that Secretary Mnuchin has taken several suggestions from conference members and tried to incorporate them into the ever-changing landscape as we move forward and through this crisis. There's not just one silver bullet. There's a lot of, I think, good things that we put in there, good things that need to be put forth in the next packages that are coming forward. But the bottom line is, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, small businesses are the engine of our economy. There is no doubt, if somebody doesn't believe that, all they have to look at is our economy right now. And I think that for me, being on the Small Business Committee is extremely valuable, and Ranking Member Shabbat gets all of our input, almost on a weekly basis to be able to put ideas forward in a bipartisan fashion to open up the economy and at the same time keeping us all healthy and safe.
Well, thank you, Congressman. I think that's well said. At this point in time, we're getting, we appreciate your generous time, getting at about 45 minutes, and wanted to just present you with the opportunity for any closing comments. I think you closed very well in your previous statement, but just wanted to turn over to you for any closing thoughts, and then I will close out the call.
Yeah, first off, I want to, when you talked about those of us on this call hearing your office assistant just a few moments ago, that was precious. We have the opportunity to bring forward a better nation for our kids and grandkids. We are going through this together, and we're going to come out of it together, stronger, more resilient, and more self-reliant. Rest assured, as we move forward and out of this, you are going to see some great discussions in the nation's capital on supply chain and the importance of made, manufactured, and mined in America. We have the strategic and necessary reasons to do so, in particular with our strategic minerals and metals. and also with our manufacturing of our pharmaceuticals and our medical supplies. So those are going to be good discussions as we get back into Washington, D.C. And I really want to thank the NFIB for your support. I want to thank you all for being with me this afternoon. And again, our office stands open and ready for people, for good ideas that are going to be brought forward. And so with that, I will sign off. I want you to all be safe and be well. Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you, Congressman Stauber. We appreciate you and your team for your continued communication and outreach, and appreciate you spending your time with us today. On behalf of NFIB, NFIB Minnesota State Director Mike Hickey, NFIB Minnesota Grassroots Manager Natalie Robinson, and myself, I would like to thank you all again for joining the call, for being members of NFIB, and for your participation and continued engagement. As Congressman Stauber said very well, please stay safe, stay healthy, and please let us know if there's anything else we can do to be helpful during this emergency situation. We will follow up and provide Congressman Stauber the questions. He addressed them very well, but just appreciate your time and have a wonderful afternoon and evening.